it's hard to know what's fact and what's fiction. Everybody who's on the outside guessing has their own incentive, right? Like, so if you're a semiconductor analyst that effectively is massively bullish Nvidia, you want it to be true that it wasn't possible to train on $6 million. Obviously, if you're the person that makes an alternative that's that disruptive, you want it to be true that it was trained on $6 million. All of that, I think, is all speculation. The thing that struck me was how different their approach was, and TK just mentioned this, but if you dig into not just the original white paper of DeepSeek, but they've also published some subsequent papers that have refined some of the details.
Chamath Palihapitiya discusses how resource constraints drove DeepSeek's innovative AI approaches, such as using a unique algorithm and bypassing Nvidia's CUDA framework. He contrasts this ingenuity with the West's abundance of resources, which he believes can hinder similar breakthroughs, emphasizing that necessity fosters innovation. He questions whether large funding for AI startups is counterproductive, suggesting that smaller budgets might encourage efficiency and creativity, as seen with DeepSeek's advancements. This approach could lead to more transformative innovations in the industry. Finally, Chamath notes that as AI becomes cheaper and more competitive, value may shift away from AI models themselves to other parts of the economy. He draws parallels to electricity, where broader economic impacts generated more value than the core technology.
I do think that this is a case, and Sachs, you can tell me if you disagree, but this is a case where necessity was the mother of invention. So I'll give you two examples where I just read these things and I was like, man, these guys are like really clever. The first is, as you said, let's put in a pin on whether they distilled O1, which we can talk about in a second. But at the end of the day, these guys were like, well, how am I going to do this reinforcement learning thing? They invented a totally different algorithm. There was the orthodoxy, right? This thing called PPO that everybody used. And they were like, no, we're going to use something else called, I think it's called GRPO or something. It uses a lot less computer memory and it's highly performant. So maybe they were constrained, Sachs, practically speaking, by some amount of compute that caused them to find this, which you may not have found if you had just a total surplus of compute availability. And then the second thing that was crazy is everybody is used to building models and compiling through CUDA, which is NVIDIA's proprietary language, which I've said for a couple times is their biggest moat, but it's also the biggest threat vector for lock-in. And these guys worked totally around CUDA, and they did something called PTX, which goes right to the bare metal. And it's controllable, and it's effectively like writing assembly. Now, the only reason I'm bringing these up is we, meaning the West, with all the money that we've had, didn't come up with these ideas. And I think part of why we didn't come up is not that we're not smart enough to do it, but we weren't forced to because the constraints didn't exist. And so I just wonder how we make sure we learn this principle. Meaning, when the AI company wakes up and rolls out of bed and some VC gives them $200 million, maybe that's not the right answer for a Series A or a seed. And maybe the right answer is 2 million so that they do these DeepSeek-like innovations.
Constraint makes for great art. What do you think, Friedberg, when you're looking at this?
Well, I think it also enables a new class of investment opportunity. Given the low cost and the speed, it really highlights that maybe the opportunity to create value doesn't really sit at that level in the value chain, but further upstream. Balaji made a comment on Twitter today that was pretty funny, or I think reflects this.
About the wrapper?
Yeah, he's like, turns out the wrapper may be the
the moat.
The moat, like, which is true. At the end of the day, if model performance continues to improve, get cheaper, and it's so competitive that it commoditizes much faster than anyone even thought, then the value is going to be created somewhere else in the value chain. Maybe it's not the wrapper. Maybe it's with the user. And maybe, by the way, here's an important point. Maybe it's further in the economy. You know, when electricity production took off in the United States, it's not like the companies are making a lot of money that are making all the electricity. It's the rest of the economy that accrues a lot of the value.
Well, you're about to see a big test of this, because if OpenAI raises $40 billion at $340 billion, that
100%.
just hit the wire. The underwriting logic at $340 billion, exactly what you just said, Freeberg. It is the wrapper, meaning ChatGPT is the next killer app. It's getting to 1 billion plus MAU, hundreds of millions of DAO.
It's competing for consumer usage. That's the model. That's the model, is like consumer usage.
Which puts them on a collision course with Meta. It's the only company that could really impact that, because the only company right now that has billions of eyeballs of DAUs per day. And by the way, Zuck said this in his earnings release. He's like, there's only going to be one company that brings AI to 1 billion plus people, and it will be us. Some version of that quote in his earnings release yesterday.
And then Microsoft showed weakness in their cloud, and then Microsoft's down 6% today. And I think it's a window for OpenAI to say, we're going to go up against Meta. This is it. We're going to be the players.
What do you guys think?
And everyone's kind of ignoring Google.
What do you guys think is happening right now between OpenAI and Microsoft? Because if it's true that this distillation thing actually happened, well, there's only one place where you could have distilled the O1 model. It's on Azure. So what the hell is going on over there?
Well, and their R1 is supported on...
Explain distillation real quick.
Yeah, so when you have a big, large parameter model, the way that you get to a smaller, more usable model along the lines of what Sachs mentioned is through this process called distillation, where the big model feeds the little model. So the little model is asking questions of the big model, and you take the answers and you refine. And by the way, you can see this. Nick, I sent you a clip. You guys can see this. I mean, there's clearly distillation happening. Nick, can you show the clip of the DeepSeek run where it shows the China answer and then deletes it? What was Winston's job in 1984, right? And it sort of starts to go through this whole summary. And then the person says, are there any actual states that currently do that? Hold on, here it goes. It says North Korea. Wait, it goes China. And then wait, watch this. Boom. So the reason why this is happening is like you're seeing this chain of thought. You're seeing the several layers, and then it's catching it after the fact. So we know that this is distilled from some other model. And my only point there, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, is right now, when you go and use OpenAI, you're using it sitting in an Azure instance somewhere, right? So this is Microsoft's cloud infrastructure that runs it. So it begs the question, it's not that it's O1's fault or OpenAI's fault that this distillation happened. And I'm not trying to assign blame, but typically if this were to happen, you'd look to your cloud provider and say, how are you letting this happen? And I don't think anybody's had a good answer for that.
Well, and the cloud provider is hosting R1 now. So they're literally undercutting ChatGPT and OpenAI at the same time.
Just to clean that up, they're hosting their own copy of it, right?
Yes.
Because R1's been
when you say
source.
they, who are you referring to, Sachs?
Microsoft.
Yeah, Microsoft is hosting their version of R1, which means they are actively subverting their partner, OpenAI, and pushing people to a cheaper model.
Well, whatever. I mean, look, Amazon's going to host their own version of R1. Grok has a version of R1.
Yeah, we have one. Cerebrus just rolled out.
It's open source now.
You guys have a buddy who has R1
it.
on his laptop, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but if it was stolen as, and the IP was stolen as Sam is claiming, that would be like, you'd think he'd be able to call up Satya and say, hey, can you not put the stolen IP on your server and promote it to everybody at a lower cost? It just shows Microsoft has no loyalty to OpenAI. Yeah, and they have, but you'd think they would have loyalty. They have no loyalty.
What it would take to distill O1, like brute force, it wouldn't be like, oh, geez, I can't believe it was distilled. It would be like such a massive number of calls against an API or against something that it wouldn't be unnoticed.
They did actually came out and said they blocked some suspicious activity recently.
Yeah, no, but they're always doing that. They're always that's constant. You're always doing that. That's like, the old school. Go ahead, Zach.
Let me address the distillation point. So I mentioned this a few days ago on Fox News that I thought it was likely or possible that distillation had occurred, and there was some evidence for this, and it became like a news story. And I didn't even realize that saying that would be news, because it's kind of an open secret in Silicon Valley. Everyone I talk to,
they're doing some level of distillation.
Yeah, I mean,
because you need to test your model against theirs anyways.
Yeah, and every single person I've talked to basically has agreed that there was some distillation here from OpenAI. Now, that doesn't mean it was the only thing going on here. I mean, to be sure, the DeepSeek team is very smart, and there were some innovations, but also there was some distillation. And really, this wasn't even a fresh news story, I think, from the point of view of Silicon Valley, because a month ago, we had a press cycle in Silicon Valley when DeepSeek's V3 model came out, that DeepSeek V3 was self-identifying as ChatGPT. When you would ask it, who are you? Like, what model are you? 5 out of 8 times, V3 would tell you that it was ChatGPT 4. And there's lots of videos and examples of this online that have been posted, right? The point is that we knew a month ago that V3 had been trained on a substantial amount of ChatGPT output, obviously, because V3 was self-identifying as ChatGPT.
The discussion highlights DeepSeek's innovative AI techniques, driven by constraints that led to groundbreaking methods like GRPO and bypassing CUDA. Chamath Palihapitiya argues that resource scarcity fosters creativity, suggesting smaller budgets for AI startups could drive similar advancements. The group contrasts this with the West's resource-rich, less inventive approach. The conversation also addresses AI commoditization, where cheaper, competitive models shift value creation further up the economic chain. They discuss tensions between OpenAI, Microsoft, and others, raising questions about partnerships, competition, and ethical AI practices in a rapidly evolving landscape. Can resource constraints truly lead to better innovation in AI? How should companies navigate ethical challenges in AI competition?